Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren, this is Reads with Lauren. Thanks so much for joining me here today. I thought this would be a great opportunity to have a chat about some books that either have a main character or a side character that is transgender in order to promote this Visibility Day. I am so glad that we get to have this day each year. I am lucky enough to be surrounded by queer people, particularly transgender people who have been so strong and so powerful in embracing their true selves. And I'm honestly honored to know them. And so I think that this is a great opportunity to have a chat. I am currently working on downloading some edited videos for the channel. I am wearing my book shirt, I have my laptop with notes, and I have some marshmallows. I figured, let's sit down, let's chat about these books, eat some rainbow marshmallows while we're at it, and let's talk some really cool books that I think that you should read with trans representation. I have 11 that I have read and loved, and I have 5 that I think are going to be really great that are on my TBR. So let's get started. So the first book that I want to recommend is Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be reading the synopsis that I've got off the internet in order to be able to articulate this in a way that will really promote the book. My descriptions are not nearly as exciting. I'm working on it, but I thought today, since I'm going to be enjoying marshmallows while I'm at it, I'll just read the synopsis because these books are great. So Hell Followed With Us is about 16-year-old boy Benji. He is on the run from the cult that raised him, the fundamentalist sect that unleashed Armageddon and decimated the world's population. Desperately, he searches for a place where the cult can't get their hands on him, or more importantly, on the bioweapon they infected him with. But when cornered by monsters born from the destruction, Benji is rescued by a group of teens from the local Atchison LGBTQ plus centre, affectionately known as the ALC. The ALC's leader, Nick, is gorgeous, autistic, and a deadly shot, and he knows Benji's darkest secret. The cult's bioweapon is mutating him into a monster deadly enough to wipe humanity from the earth once and for all. Still, Nick offers Benji shelter among his ragtag book of queer teens, as long as Benji can control the monster and use its power to defend the ALC. Eager to belong, Benji accepts Nick's terms until he discovers the ALC's mysterious leader has a hidden agenda and more than a few secrets of his own. I read this a couple of years ago as an ARC copy, and I absolutely devoured it. It is gory, it is gross, it is queer rep, it is funny, it goes right into, people's pronouns, and there are different pronouns all through it, some that I hadn't heard prior to, and I just think it's great. I think that it's awesome that they've been able to create this story with all of these different aspects into it and create this really cool dystopian sort of horror. I just loved it. I think it's a YA, but it would be very close to an adult because there is a lot of, I just remember it being really intense and a lot of fun. So I really, really enjoyed it and highly, highly recommend. The next book series I want to talk about is a book series that I absolutely adore. I have the first 4 volumes of the bigger, the big epic volumes. And it's Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Now, this only has a side character that is transgender. I think this is a really great representation of an older series that has trans representation. Neil Gaiman is great. I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and after watching the Sandman series, I decided to venture into the graphic novels. They are slightly different. They're kind of connected to Batman and Joker and, all of that in the series. However, the books go on this crazy journey and there is a lot of blood and gore, and if you've watched the show is very similar. So if you liked that, you'll really enjoy the graphic novel series. And the reason that this is on my list is because one of the characters in the later volumes is transgender, and it's got great representation there. So this is one that I do also highly recommend. Time for a marshmallow. This is not paid by any means. I just really appreciate the Marshmallow Company, and we bought these for housewarming and a gift to ourselves when we moved house, and we still got some. So I've cut them up into smaller pieces so that they will last for longer, and I am practicing portion control. But this one is the caramel dolce de leche, which is really beautiful. So I'm going to take a little bit while we talk about the next book. So good. The next series that I want to talk about is a series that I did talk about in my recent book series saga, which I think that when I release this one, I will have only uploaded one of the three. And I'm pretty sure that it's in that one. And it's the Witch King series. So I didn't realize that the second one had been released already. But I initially read book one as an ARC and I really enjoyed it. And I'll read you the synopsis because it's got great trans representation, and there are currently 2 books out in the series, and I'm definitely launching myself towards the second book ASAP. So the synopsis for The Witch King is: in Asselin, Fae rule and witches like Wyatt Croft don't. Wyatt's betrothal to his best friend, Fae Prince Emir North, was supposed to change that. But when Wyatt lost control of his magic one devastating night, he fled to the human world. Now, a coldly distant Emir has hunted him down. Despite transgender Wyatt's newfound identity and troubling past, Emir has no intention of dissolving their engagement. In fact, he claims they must marry now or risk losing the throne. Jaded, Wyatt strikes a deal with the enemy, hoping to escape Aslan forever. But as he gets to know Emir, Wyatt realizes the boy he once loved may still exist, and as the witches face worsening conditions, he must decide once and for all what's more important, his people or his freedom. This was another one. I absolutely loved it. Highly, highly recommend. It's a YA, paranormal, I don't know if you'd call it an urban fantasy, I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to get my hands on book 2. The next book that I want to talk about is Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender. So this book is about Felix's love, and he has never been in love, and yes, he's painfully aware of the irony. He desperately wants to know what it's like and why it seems so easy for everyone but him to find someone. What's worse is that, even though he is proud of his identity, Felix also secretly fears that he's one marginalization too many, black, queer, and transgender, to ever get his own happily ever after. When an anonymous student begins sending him transphobic messages after publicly posting Felix's dead name alongside images of him before he transitioned, Felix comes up with a plan for revenge. What he didn't count on is his catfish scenario landing him in a quasi-love triangle. But as he navigates his complicated feelings, Felix begins a journey of questioning and self-discovery that helps redefine his most important relationship, how he feels about himself. This book made me put all of Kaysen Callender's work into my TBR as soon as I was finished. This was a really great YA book. It was a great read. I highly, highly recommend it, especially if you do not have a lot of experience with people who have transitioned at school. I highly recommend this book. And I haven't read any more of their work, but Kaysen, I'm coming after your books. I'm really excited to keep going with them. Let's dive into the mint chocolate. I like these ones. They've got the chocolate chips on top. So good. So good. So minty fresh. So the next 2 books are Becky Chambers' books, and all of her books have really great gender and sexuality representation, so I recommend all of them. But these 2 books are short story collections. One is a series of 2, one is a standalone, and the first is To Be Taught If Fortunate. So this is a book where Becky Chambers imagines a future in which, instead of terraforming planets to sustain human life, explorers of the solar system instead transform themselves. Ariadne is one such explorer. As an astronaut on an extrasolar research vessel, she and her fellow crewmates sleep between worlds and wake up each time with different features. Her experience is one of fluid body and stable mind, and of a unique perspective on the passage of time. Back on Earth, society changes dramatically from decade to decade, as it always does. Ariadne may awaken to find that support for space exploration back home has waned, or that her country of birth no longer exists, or that a cult has arisen from their cosmic findings, only to dissolve once more by the next waking. But the moods of Earth have little bearing on their mission, to explore, to study, and to send their learnings home. This was a great book. I really loved it. I was so sad when it ended. I wish that we had another book in the series. It was very beautiful, and one of the characters on the travels with Ariadne is trans, and great representation and a really good story. The other book series I wanted to talk about by Becky Chambers, which has really great non-binary representation, is A Psalm for the Wild Built. So this is the Monk and Robot series, and basically in this story, robots gained self-awareness, laid down their tools, wandered en masse into the wilderness, never to be seen again, fading into myth and urban legend. Now the life of the tea monk who tells this story is upended by the arrival of a robot, there to honour the old promise of checking in. The robot cannot go back until the question of what do people need is answered. But the answer to that question depends on who you ask and how. They will need to ask it a lot. Chambers' series asks, in a world where people have what they want, does having more matter? This is a really good short story, and book 2 is just as good. I found it really refreshing. I enjoyed the conversations between the monk and the robot. I could talk about Becky Chambers forever. I love all of her books. I've read them all so far, and I will read anything else that she releases. So yeah, those are 2 that I very much recommend. So the next book that I want to talk about is The Crow, the Lazarus Heart. I mentioned this in my previous video. It is part of a series. They are kind of standalone stories, but they are all in the Crow series. This one I enjoyed. It doesn't have the same sort of setup as the other Crow stories. You know, the relationship is not perfect and it's not beautiful, but the author has since transitioned, and there is a trans character as one of the main characters in this story. And so I really enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. It was messy, it was real, these people were human, and yeah, it was one that I really thoroughly enjoyed, and I do want to find more of this author's books. I've heard many great things about his horrors, and yeah, something that I definitely want to venture into. But if you're looking for something a little bit grungy, a little bit messy, a little bit, you know, vengeful with the sort of Crow themes, then this is definitely one for you. The next book that I want to recommend is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. So the synopsis says, Reese almost had it all, a loving relationship with Amy, an apartment in New York City, and a job she didn't hate. She'd scraped together what previous generations of trans women could only dream of, a life of mundane bourgeois comforts. The only thing missing was a child. But then her girlfriend Amy detransitioned and became Ames, and everything fell apart. Now Reese is caught in a self-destructive pattern, avoiding her loneliness by sleeping with married men. Ames isn't happy either. He thought detransitioning to live as a man would make life easier, but that decision cost him his relationship with Reese, and losing her meant losing his only family. Even though their romance is over, he longs to find a way back to her. When Ames's boss and lover, Katrina, reveals that she's pregnant with his baby and that she's not sure whether she wants to keep it, Ames wonders if this is the chance he's been waiting for. Could the 3 of them form some kind of unconventional family and raise the baby together? This provocative debut is about what happens at the emotional, messy, vulnerable corners of womanhood that platitudes and good intentions can't reach. Tori Peters brilliantly and fearlessly navigates the most dangerous taboos around gender, sex, and relationships, gifting us a thrillingly original, witty, and deeply moving novel. Now, I enjoyed this book. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but it's a real slice of life story, and these characters are also flawed, they're human, they're real. You know, this isn't like fluffy, it isn't beautiful, but it touches on some really interesting subjects, and I highly recommend it if you are looking for something like this. Also, I don't personally know of many books about people who have detransitioned. Lemon meringue. Yeah. Lemon's my favourite. Now, a memoir that I picked up and really enjoyed is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a series of personal essays where LGBTQIA+ activist George M. Johnson explores his childhood, adolescence, and college years. From the memories of getting his teeth kicked out by bullies at age 5 to flea marketing with his loving grandmother, his first sexual relationships, this young adult memoir weaves together the trials and triumphs faced by Black queer boys. So it covers topics such as gender identity, toxic masculinity, brotherhood, families, structural marginalization, consent, and Black joy. This was a really great read. I really got a lot out of it, which was wonderful. I love reading memoirs and learning about other people's experiences, and I really appreciated this book. And I think that it is well worth everyone having a read. I love that it is written in the YA, so that it is something that teenagers can pick up and learn and grow and explore and evolve in these beautiful ways. And just experience other people's stories and other people's lives. I think that's such an important part of growing and evolving who you are as a person. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend it. I really enjoyed that one. So the next book was an ARC that I picked up a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed it. It's another real, like, it's not fluffy, it's a real slice of life story. It's an autobiographical novel. So really interesting premise. It is set in socially conservative Texas, and success and nonconformity cannot exist for Brian, a Black divorced father of 2 kids. Lindsay, the athletic golden child, and Lance, the unorthodox queer thespian. Brian's mother is prideful, domineering, homophobic, and loves bragging to her high society girlfriends about Brian's accomplishments and promotion to VP at a large multinational oil gas company. Brian vigorously steers clear of conversations with his mother about more grandkids and an eligible Black woman because Brian has been secretly dating Nadia, a white transgender woman. So Douglas Bell reveals in this autobiographical novel the harm we do to each other when social and family standards keep us from authentically loving or being loved. It is a timely story of a man's journey to find long-lasting love as he fights through contemporary racism and maligned sexual and gender identity constructs as his biases are revealed while parenting a queer child. This was also a really great read, and I'm so glad that I got to read it as an ARC. I really enjoyed this one. It's definitely not a happy book, but it is a very needed story to be shared. I think that the more people that share their stories that have gone like this will give others the strength to do the same and to finally open up and be themselves. So really important story that I really thoroughly enjoyed. Another book that I got to read as an ARC, which is really, really exciting, is Fine, a comic about gender by Rhea Ewing. So graphic artist Rhea neared college graduation in 2012 when they became consumed with the question, what is gender? This obsession sparked a quest in which they eagerly approached both friends and strangers in their quiet Midwest town for interviews to turn into comics. A decade later, this project exploded into a sweeping portrait of the intricacies of gender expression with interviewees from all over the country. Questions such as, how do you identify? Produced fiercely honest stories of dealing with adolescents taking hormones, changing pronouns, and how these experiences can differ, often drastically, depending on culture, race, and religion. Amidst beautifully rendered scenes emerges Ewing's own story of growing up in rural Kentucky, grappling with their identity as a teenager, and ultimately finding themselves through art and by creating something this very fine. Tender and wise, inclusive and inviting, Fine is an indispensable account for anyone eager to define gender in their own terms. This was also, I'm so glad that I got to read this as an ARC because it is another story that needs to be shared. Like it's so, I love these stories where they, interview all these people and they utilize their stories to create this one beautiful story, and to have it in a graphic novel format was so great. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. On to the strawberry cheesecake. So now I've got 5 honourable mentions. These are ones that are on my TBR, but I have not read yet. So I cannot tell you if I think they are good, but they look incredible. So the first one is Meet Cute Diary by Emery Lee. This is a YA that centres on Noah, and Noah thinks he's an expert on romance. He has to be for his popular blog, The Meet Cute Diary, a collection of trans happily ever afters. There's just one problem. All the stories are fake. What started as the fantasies of a trans boy afraid to step out of the closet has grown into a beacon of hope for trans readers around the globe. But when a troll exposes the blog as fiction, Noah's world unravels. The only way to save the diary is to convince everyone that the stories are true, but he doesn't have any proof. Then Drew walks into Noah's life and the pieces fall into place. Drew is willing to fake date Noah to save the diary. But when Noah's feelings grow beyond their stage romance, he realizes that dating in real life isn't quite the same as finding love on the page. Sounds so good. The next one that I wanted to mention is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Diva. This is a recent release. When Ben comes out to their parents as non-binary, they're thrown out of their house and forced to move in with their estranged older sister Hannah and her husband Thomas, whom Ben has never even met. Struggling with an anxiety disorder compounded by their parents' rejection, they come out only to Hannah, Thomas and their therapist and try to keep a low profile in a new school. But Ben's attempts to survive the last half year of senior year unnoticed are thwarted when Nathan Allen, a funny and charismatic student, decides to take Ben under his wing. As Ben and Nathan's friendship grows, their feelings for each other begin to change, and what started as a disastrous turn of events looks like it might just be a chance to start a happier new life. That sounds so sweet. I love queer romances so much. The next one on my list is one that's been on my TBR for ages and I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but I really want to, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Yadriel, when his traditional Latina family has problems accepting his gender, he becomes determined to prove himself a real brujo. With the help of his cousin and best friend Maritza, he performs the ritual himself and then sets out to find the ghost of his murdered cousin and set it free. However, the ghost he summons is actually Julian Diaz, the school's resident bad boy, and Julian is not about to go quietly into death. He's determined to find out what happened and tie up some loose ends before he leaves. Left with no choice, Yadriel agrees to help Julian so that they can both get what they want, but the longer Yadriel spends with Julian, the less he wants to let him leave. That's got, fantastical vibes and energy, which sounds really exciting as well. Another one. This is actually a classic that has been on my list for years, and I really want to get onto it, and that is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. So this novel opens as Orlando, a young nobleman in Elizabeth's England, awaits a visit from the Queen and traces his experience with first love as England under James I lies locked in the embrace of the Great Frost. At the midpoint of the novel, Orlando, now an ambassador in Constantinople, awakes to find that he is now a woman. And the novel indulges in farce and irony to consider the roles of women in the 18th and 19th centuries. As the novel ends in 1928, a year consonant with full suffrage for women, Orlando, now a wife and mother, stands poised at the brink of a future that holds new hope and promise for women. So that one sounds really fun. I have been wanting to read that for so long. Now my last honourable mention that is on my radar and I really hope to read at some point very soon is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. So this centres on Viola, and when Viola was presumed dead at Waterloo, she took the opportunity to live at last as herself. But freedom does not come without a price, and Viola paid for hers with the loss of her wealth, her title, and her closest companion, Justin, the Duke of Gracewood. Only when their families reconnect years after the war does Viola learn how deep that loss truly was. Shattered without her, Gracewood has retreated so far into grief that Viola barely recognises her old friend in the lonely, brooding man he has become. As Viola strives to bring Gracewood back to himself, fresh desires give new names to old feelings. Feelings that would have been impossible once and may be impossible still, but which Viola cannot deny, even if they cost her everything all over again. Now, I've heard so many good things about this book. I've heard that it is very long, and it could be shorter, but I've also heard that it is wonderful. So I would love to give this one a go very soon, and I think that it's one that will be highly recommended once I have finished. But that's it today. That is the 16 books that I recommend with trans representation. However, this project made me realize that there are so many that I have not read and so many that I now want to read. So this list could have been way longer, but I've kept it very short and sweet for today. In the comments section below, let me know if you have any great recommendations with great trans representation. Everyone have a wonderful Trans Visibility Day. It coincides with Easter, which is exciting. So celebrate your beautiful people in your life that are transgender and non-binary while you enjoy the chocolates you receive from Easter Bunny. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you in another video very, very soon. Goodbye, my darlings. Almost forgot. Rainbow. The rainbow marshmallow. This is watermelon fizz. And I've had it already before, but it's so freaking good. And it's rainbow. Bye.